Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kinga Nolan, and I'm a product marketing intern here at Farmer's Edge. And this afternoon, I'm joined by Cheryl McLaurin, and she's a Territory Sales Agronomist down in the Southern Plains. Hi, Cheryl. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kinga. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about um, insects and how to manage them and how we can use FarmCommand to help with scouting all those pests out in the field today.
It's definitely one of those problems that's got to be very, very regionally based. I just want to preface that everything here needs to be taken with whatever grain of salt that you have for your region and your IPM approach to managing your farm. But we do want to give you some good tips on how you can use FarmCommand and Farmer's Edge to really hone in on making the best decisions for your farm specifically. So if anybody has any questions, just drop them in the chat. And then if we ever have any questions later, just let us know. And also talk to your local extension service. Those guys are going to be the best resource any of us have. I know you're up in Canada. You're a lot cooler in your season than I am. We're down here in Central Texas, and it's about 105 degrees, and it's been
Oh, man.
105 for 2 weeks. So, that's a mixed blessing there, specifically for this talk, because we don't really have many insect problems right now, and the ones we do are not doing any more damage than the heat and drought is. So here in Texas, we're just kind of live and let live at the current time. How's it going up there in Canada?
Well, definitely a lot cooler, got some more rain. It's been pretty warm this week, at least where I am in Alberta. But I know, like, especially with like canola, we've had like a lot of flea beetles going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big thing that my customers have been seeing up here. But I'm just wondering, like, in terms of being in Texas, like, what are the main insects that you get down there?
So it depends on what your crop is for sure and the region that you're in. Texas is really interesting that it covers everything from pretty much subtropical up to a high plains. I wouldn't call it full on acidic situation, but definitely a mesic moisture regime. And so when we talk about rice, we've got aphids, we've got midges, when we have birds too that are a big pest in them. And then cotton, aphids, plant bugs, spider mites, that sort of thing, stink bugs, and a lot of our our pest species you'll find them in multiple crops. But when it comes to our grasses, we'll have cutworms and loopers and cotton rootworm or corn rootworm kind of things. So you just have to kind of know what you've planted and what is being planted in the next field, because you will have species jump from one crop to another depending on the time of season. And that's something that's really important that is going to be our first thing, is we're going to need to identify our risk periods. Depending on where you are in your season is what you need to be scouting for. So I'm going to pull up a picture real quick that I think is and if you've had a corn crop, you probably are familiar with this kind of thing. Where you are in your crop is what you need to be looking for and what you need to be treating. And so early in our season, it's really, really important for us there's so many species that can affect our little seedlings, our cotyledons. When you're up in alfalfa and canola, it's flea beetles, because those are, once it gets past, what is it, 4-leaf, I think, in canola, you're not really worried with flea beetles. They can't do much to it. Same with white grubs and some of these chinch bugs and stuff. When they're really small, when the plants are really small, they can really affect how the plant is. Once the plant's nice and big, it can deal with it. It can outgrow any issues it's going to have there, except for our corn borer, because that will specifically affect our ears and our kernel set and that sort of thing. And then the other thing is, it depends on what you're trying to do with your crop. If you're looking for, like in sweet corn, you're looking for a really nice, pretty, cosmetically pleasing ear that, when somebody shucks open to eat, doesn't have a worm on it, which, sometimes you can just flick them off. It's fine.
But it's extra protein, right?
Yeah, like, come on. It was good for Timon and Pumbaa, it's good for us.
Yeah.
So those sorts of things, you may be more worried about that in a sweet corn variety versus a grain corn variety. So we always want to make sure that people know when they need to be out scouting. And once you get to a certain point, it's more important in cotton to scout later in the year. So once we get fruit set and bowl set, we want to make sure that we're out there at least once a week looking at these plants. And, and it's more of an issue of knowing when your planting date was, because that can really affect what kind of risk you are. And so we're going to make sure that we are going to do, later, it's typically the rule of thumb is later planted crops are going to be at higher risk for insects, but your earlier planted crops are at higher risk for freeze damage. So it's always having to weigh those sorts of issues. So that's, that's how we go. But, it's everybody's got a little bit of magic in how they do that. And so the other thing to notice is when you're thinking about which field you're going to scout and what you're looking for is what's around you. We often will see plant bugs move into cotton after you've got corn tasseling, because what's actually happening is they're moving out of that corn and into your cotton, and they're a much more damaging pest in cotton kind of thing. And the same thing will happen with chinch bugs, and I believe it's trying to think. Oh, chinch bugs. Yeah, that's the one, because it'll move out of CRP land over the winter. It'll overwinter in like wheat stalks or in your CRP land, which is, your buffer areas, your native areas. And then once you've got a corn crop up and nice and pretty, they'll kind of move in and start attacking the corn, and then they'll move back out kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we're aware of what might happen. And then I know something that happens in Canada with, I believe it's called aster leafhoppers. Like they're wind blown. So if you've got them on the western side of a territory, you need to make sure you're ahead of it kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And that's again where those IPM reports from your local stations and stuff will be really helpful to show you what you need to be looking for and what we might need to preventively spray for. Can we get out ahead of it kind of thing? And then, we just need to know what particular species we're looking at, because certain species need to be, even if they're both what's called Lepidoptera, which is a caterpillar, even if they're both Lepidoptera, they're both caterpillars, they look kind of similar. Different species react different ways to chemicals. So we want to make sure we're using the right product at the right rate, at the right time. All those kinds of things are good for our applications. Absolutely. But yeah, so I want to share my screen and show a couple tools that Farmer's Edge has for those. Sure. So one of the things we've seen a lot of research come out is for cutworms, we can actually use the GDD50 to give us a good indicator of when we need to be looking for those, because they've identified that cutworms can't actually cut a corn plant or a cotton plant or any kind of plant until it's gotten to GD50 300. So once we hit that number, that's when we need to go start looking for them. So
do you want to explain a little bit, maybe to those who don't know what GDD is?
So it's a growing degree day. So it's heat units. It's how hot you've gotten consecutively. So not consecutively, cumulatively up to that point in the year. So however many days above 50 degrees we've accumulated to that point. So in cotton, we're usually worried about heat units above 60 degrees because it's a much more tropical plant. And for you guys up there, we have GDDs of 41 base unit or 50 is for a lot of our crops. So that's a good indicator that, okay, it's time for us to make sure we're out there. Because the other thing too is there's only so many hours in the day and we only have so many laborers on farms. You can't look at every field every day to see these things. And sometimes you got leases across the county or 30 miles down the road, 30 kilometers down the road, you can't get to every day. So you need to be aware of when you need to be looking at these sorts of things. And then something that we've used really heavily is our scouting application. So I'm going to share my phone really quickly and let you see kind of what that looks like for us. Give me just 1 second to get it up.
So here's one question, Cheryl, while
Mm-hmm.
you're pulling that up there. So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about these GGD days, and so can I like go into FarmCommand and pull it up for like a specific field and look at how much is accumulated per date, or can I look at like a week? Like, how does that work?
So it's going to be the cumulative for that weather station interpolated to that field. It's not over, like, you're not counting degree unit or heat units over like 2 weeks. You're saying for this season that it's been above 50 degrees kind of thing. So it kind of restarts
Fantastic.
every spring, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's perfect.
Okay, so here we go. Let me pull this over. There it goes. All right, sorry about that. So
Awesome.
this is a customer field of ours, and I really enjoy working with this guy. He's really uses a lot of his tools really efficiently, which is awesome. So we've got in his scouting app, we've got this field info. We can see that this is a crop in cotton. So I can't look at cornfields right now because our corn's actually in harvest already. So
Oh, wow.
most of those fields are emptied out. We're blowing and going down here. And so when we look at our imagery, we can see that on July 12th, we had an area over here that started turning red. And what we can actually look back is we can see back on July 10th, we had a health change notification that was saying that this has gotten bad all of a sudden. Like, it hadn't kind of gradually gone there. It's just really changed. And if we even look back, maybe a week, 10 days before that, we can see that it was the other way. Like, this side was the worst side. So what I'm thinking we had happen here was this is a wetter part of the field. And so as it dried out, this area got really nice and healthy, and the dry side started to dry out. But what I'd also want to go check is make sure we don't have any extra, ooh, I'm clicking on that like that's going to do it, that we don't have any extra insect pressure in these damaged areas. Because once stuff starts getting droughty, it's never a plant dies for one reason. It's usually a combination of things. It's stressed, it's had an insect hit it, and that insect has induced like a pathogen or something. So it's multiple things all at once. So we want to go check the stressed areas to make sure of what's going on there and what's causing that stress. So that's what we'll do there. And I'm going to give you kind of an example of if I was scouting in this field real quick. So what I would do is I'm going to go back, and this is our scouting app, and I'm going to say I want a new record. Whoop. And it's going to be in that field. Now, I'm not standing in that field, so it's going to be a little wonky. I thought about going out and doing a scouting app report today, but like I said, it's 105 and I'm going to die. I definitely couldn't have my hair doing anything in that kind of weather. So we're sitting there, and what it'll do is it'll actually kind of put it in the middle of that field, and then I can go back and change it later, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to do an insect report. And if I wanted to take a photo of them, I could. But we can say, okay, it's getting later in the season. We saw some army worms, or actually I'm going to put plant bugs. I'm going to have to call this grower afterwards and tell him I didn't actually see a plant bug. Excuse me. No, I'm going to put spider mites. If I could spell. There we go. And then we saw them as an adult. And then we want to say, how much did we see? I tend to do a percentage. And, I saw them, this was going to be a patch over in that red section. We saw 25% of the plants in that patch had a spider mite of the adult size on them. And we can do multiple reports for each field and for each scouting. So if we saw like 5 or 6 different bugs, we could put them all in. And the thing I really like is you can take pictures right there and go ahead. And then you can say, if you're a crop scout, and you can say, okay, I really want to go in and say, we've already hit our economic threshold level at this, we need to spray this, and we need to do it in the next 3 days. And that grower never has to step in field. He can send that to his foreman or run out to the tractor himself, load it up,
that's fantastic,
go to town kind of thing. So we hit save, and we can see it right there. And we can take any other observations we want to while we're out there as well. I'm going to finish that. And then I want to show you now what that looks like when you get back to your desktop. Or, if you've got a crop scout out there and you're trying to work on something at home, work on the books, do something, or you're out, fishing and you want to check on some stuff. So I'm going to pull this back over here.
So Cheryl, I'll just jump in here for another
Yeah.
moment. So I know, like you said, you're not in the field right now, but so if I'm actually in the field and I'm scouting and I see those spider mites and I add that observation, it's
Hmm.
going to geotag it right to where I am, right?
Yes, exactly. So if you're, out
Awesome.
in one little bitty corner of the field, you want to say, I saw him over here, but I didn't see him over here. You know exactly where you were. And I've done that before, and on like a wet corner, and where it's kind of, really close to like a slough or a wetland area. And I didn't know what I was looking at. So I took a picture of the bug. I had where I was. I knew what kind of crop I was in. I knew what the weather was that day because that's all recorded
Yeah.
on FarmCommand. And I was able to send that off to an extension agent who's a friend of mine, was like, hey, can you help me out here? Because I have not seen this species before. And that happens a lot. I don't know every bug that's out there, and we might see some new stuff, and we don't want to see new stuff. And so he was able to get me an answer really quick because I had, again, photos, host species, environmental variables, and all that kind of stuff. So it answered a lot of his questions right off the bat there, versus where when I worked for the extension service, you get a picture of kind of like or somebody would run into the office. This is the best part, was somebody would come into the office with like this dried out stick in a bag and be like, can you tell me what this weed is? And I was like, how long has this been in your truck? It's been in my truck for 4 days. Oh, where did you find it?
Oh
Oh, it was
no.
over on the west side. There just wasn't very much data to give me. And I'm like, I know it's a broadleaf kind of thing. And so we'd have to go back and forth a few more times in that, where I was able to just send him everything in one go, which was really nice.
Definitely a huge step up.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my
It is.
goodness.
So this is the same guy's farm. So we have the Farm Command Center in FarmCommand, which is kind of like, command center. Like it's a control station. I like to think of it as like, when you're standing at, the deck of a ship and you've got all the instruments in front of you, kind of thing. This is one of those things where most of the information that you need can be found right here as a grower. And so we've got a scouting app, right, or the scouting tab right here. And so these observations, we can pick which ones we want to see. So we want to see, I'm going to just give you a real quick show. This guy, he is on it when it comes to observations. He's got guys out there checking everything, and his crop scouters are really, really good. So I just want to do the insects. I want to click them off. I'm going to do insects, and I want to do scouted by Cheryl McLaurin.
See, I really like the ability to filter through so you can kind of cut out the weeds or something, right?
Yeah, for sure. And if you've got multiple crop scouters and, some guys are working different weeks than others, kind of thing, it's really easy to filter that out. It's really nice. So I was going to go in and show you, this is a one that I took in the field a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to this grower's foreman, and I said, I didn't see any insect reports in this field, so I took one for you. And I sent him a photo, and we were able to see that he was starting to see some pretty significant, I'll blow it up a little bit, stink bug pressure in some of his corn, nymphs, adults, eggs, full gamut. So,
wow.
I know it's hot and stuff, but he was still getting enough moisture to make a good crop at this point in time. So I wanted to make sure that he knew that he needed to get out there if he continued to see this many out there. And he was really thankful, and I was able to show him exactly, it was right here in this section of the field that I saw them. So you should go check. And he was able to see them himself. And we were able to say, 15 to 20% in these little patches. I didn't see them all over the field. I just saw them on some edge. So maybe it was coming out of some other field kind of thing. It was getting blown in. And, a lot of things we'll try to do, one way that we'll try to capture or reduce insect infestation is we'll do trap crops between. So if you've got a host crop and you've got a crop that you want to be growing, you can kind of get them to stop. Like, so if you've got sorghum over here and corn, and your corn you knew had these bugs in it, and you don't want it to get over to your later planted sorghum, you can maybe plant some Sudan grass, which is going to host similar species, get them into that Sudan grass, and then you can spray the heck out of that Sudan grass before it gets to your sorghum.
Nice.
And we could, we don't have the same re-entry intervals if it's a forage crop or a hay crop versus something that we're going to harvest for grain. So again, follow the labels and everything like that. But that's one way that having that that geodata, that georeference location is going to help us, kind of thing. So
absolutely.
And then the other thing again is when we look at our field layers and look at our satellite imagery, we want to see why we need to look in these particular areas to make sure that we are scouting appropriately, that we are using our labor in the most efficient ways, kind of thing. So I'm trying to think. July 10th. Some of this is looking bad because it's dried down grain, and I believe some of this has actually been harvested since then. I know this has got soybeans in it now, so it's a really young crop, but that gives us an idea of where we may need to be looking. This is already harvested, and this was a later seeding here, so
right.
We know that that's what's going on there. But yeah, so that's what's really, really important for us in these areas, is to make sure that we are knowing our time of scouting, knowing where we need to be scouting, and those sorts of things. So, when we talk about scouting too, we also want to be talking about good scouting practices. And something that's really helpful to me, it seems like every state extension service has their own version of this, and it's something I definitely recommend, is a publication from your local extension service on insect control. This one is actually out of Mississippi State. I have several states since I cover multiple states, but Hail State, it's my alma mater. But they'll have identification, best scouting practices, and most importantly, your economic threshold levels. So when we talk about making good data-driven decisions, if we see one stink bug in a field, that's not necessarily enough data for us to say, gosh, we got to go spray. You have to know your density of infestation. You need to know how much it's going to cost you to go spray for those, and how much damage at that level of density you're expected to see, and weigh that against your commodity prices. If you spray at $20 an acre for whatever pest, but you're only going to have lost, if you had left them alone, 2 bushels an acre, it's probably not even worth your time to go out and just let it be. So it'll be fine. Yeah. But if you've got a really high quality crop or high dollar crop, or you've got a really bad infestation, it's definitely going to make sense to do that. And that's a lot of times where seed treatments comes in, because it's all in the same pass, and we're getting it where most of our plant species are at their most sensitive, kind of thing. But we also want to make sure that we're doing good scouting. A good crop scout, or a grower who's doing his own scouting, is going to make sure that we're scouting at different times of day. A lot of our bugs will only be active in dusk and dawn. I mean, when it's 105, I wouldn't be moving either. Or in the heat of the day, they may be hiding in the dirt, in cracks, under clods, that kind of thing. So we need to make sure that we're either getting up or going out late. A lot of recommendations that I've heard lately are to take if you don't have narrows, if you got a little bit wider rows, taking a black or dark gray drop cloth instead of a white drop cloth, and kind of using those to you lay it down on the ground, you beat off the bugs, and so that different color allows you to see those smaller nymphs that usually are a white or a light color, and we can get those. And usually the nymphs are some of the more damaging part of the life cycle. And then if you need to be doing sweeps, how many bugs per sweep, or swoop is what they call it, is going to be where you make your decisions. So having a good relationship with your local extension service, and most extension services are also putting out either weekly or bi-monthly scouting reports. Like, these are the things we've seen. These are the things you need to be watching out for. These are the things that should be coming up soon. And those are really, really invaluable. I use those myself, and they're usually, you can sign up for either a podcast or text notification is really helpful too. I know Texas A&M does a regional text notification. You can sign up for whatever regions you need, and it just comes to your phone, and it's like a 10-minute, hey, this is what we saw kind of thing for each county in that region, which is wonderful. And, it's really handy, I feel, for our growers to have this historical data when it comes to, because we can look at what our observations were last year. Did we see these same bugs in the same field year after year? Do we need to change crops? If for whatever reason we're not in a rotation in this particular field, or we're in like a keep it the same crop 2 or 3 years and then rotate, maybe that's not the best choice here. Maybe we need to change to a completely different, maybe we need to change varieties so we can get a resistance issue gone, kind of thing. And then some species of bugs we have as a multi-year thing. Wireworms are larvae for I think it's 2 to 5 years. So if you've seen them one year, you will see them the next year unless you were able to completely control them. And that's another thing too about having that historical data. Even if it was just last week's, you can go back to those same areas that you saw them and check and see if you had breakthrough sprays, because that's always the thing we want to make sure is we're not getting, because that can also lead to resistance. As if we didn't get them the first time, we don't want those particular individual pests to go on and have more generations and possibly pass on that resistance to further generations. And
so just a piece on the historical data, if I can jump in there. So, you walk through FarmCommand and adding those scouting observations. So let's say this year I see those spider mites or any other insect for that matter. And next year I go back to the same field and maybe I want to see where those spider mites were last year. Do I have the ability to go back and look at that information?
Yeah. So what you would do is and I do this all the time. I have my app and I have my previous scouting, and you can actually change it the year that you're in on your app from 2022 to 2021 to 2020. I think I put too many 20s. If you knew that way back when you had seen this really funky species and you want to see if it's shown up again, that GPS point is still there and you can walk yourself to it on your app. And I mean, I've done it in pretty poor cell service areas. It might jump around a little bit, but if I can stand still for just a sec, it'll catch it again. And we can always use signal boosters and that sort of stuff. But, I do that all the time because that's something I personally like to do, is go out and check time and time again. If this was a poor performing crop early in the season, was it able to grow out of that damage? Or, is it now a compounding factor? Do we now have bugs and drought, kind of thing? Because that is what helps me tune my, those scouting layers I was showing you. Why are they bad, kind of thing? What's the issue there? And it kind of gives me a better understanding of how to look through those layers and to train my growers on how to utilize them. And that's definitely really important, particularly, like I said, with these overwintering species. Like some cutworms, they'll pupate overwinter in the ground. You'll see the adults, and the next thing you know, you've got cutworms in the field. So if you knew you had them last year, and maybe you missed an application late in the season because it was raining, or you had to get on harvest, but you knew they were out there, and there wasn't a lot of them, but some. That's the other thing too, is if it was below economic threshold levels last year, it might not be this year. So we need to know whether we need to change through to a different crop in that particular field, or if we need to go and just double check that what we have done has worked and that we don't need to apply anything, for sure.
Definitely.
But yeah. And I think lygus bugs do the same thing.
There you go.
They'll kind of overwinter in the edges of the fields, and then they'll move back in, kind of thing. So that kind of thing is always fun. And if, there's stuff like I know in wheat we have an issue with mites that will come out of CRP land, but there's no actual labeled miticide for them. And you can see them, exactly in the direct, it'll be basically a line of damage on our scouting layers in the direction of the prevailing wind where they've blown out of CRP land. And so if you know that you've had that issue in those CRP fields before and you haven't been able to treat or burn or whatever, those host plants, maybe we need to change to a different species or a different crop in that field that's not as, or give it a couple years to where that density in the what's the word I'm looking for? The edges, that area has dropped down some, that we're not giving it such a great habitat to live in.
Right. So, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
I just
lots of
talked a
things to
whole
look out for.
bunch. Oh my gosh.
No, that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Do you have anything else that you want to share with our live audience today, Cheryl?
No, it really is important for you, and this is something as a grower to utilize in FarmCommand is the crop planner, because that allows you to establish what your actual expenses in your field would be and what your break evens are. And once you have that as an actual number, not a guess, like I think if we're around $15, a bushel, or excuse me, not, I don't know if anything's $15. We'll see. Soybeans fine, but if corn's above $7 a bushel, everything's gravy kind of thing. But if you know your insurance, your rent, your fuel expenses, your pumping expenses and your inputs, and that you can take a decent guess at what a commodity price would be, or what your insurance cost would be, then you can actually say, okay, once we're at that economic threshold level, and this is my particular economic threshold level, we need to go spray, or let's push it off a little bit. Let's see if the weather changes and it takes care of itself. The beneficials can come in and do it. That's the other thing too, is if you go, hellfire through a field, you typically are going to wipe out your beneficials, and you may have a flare of some of the nastier stuff, like spider mites is a huge example of that, where if we've knocked out the beneficials, we'll have a flare in a species that's actually even more difficult to control. And if we can give it like an extra week for ladybugs or whatever to get in there and really munch, then maybe we don't actually need to spray, kind of thing. And so I really recommend to our farmers that they look at those. And I know it's difficult to take the time to sit down and do those sorts of things, but once it's done, it's in there, and it's there season to season. What your rent is going to be. What your fertilizer costs can be for the season. You might have to go in once a year and fix those sorts of things, but what those are going to be. And those random rainy days, it's always nice to take that opportunity and do that. And right now it's too early to do anything.
That's true. That is true.
Just watching everything burn. It's great. But and so being in contact with your local extension service and looking for those publications they put out, that is a great service that is free to the public. They sometimes have a little like $2 or $5 just for like shipping and binding for those things. But if you go to farm shows or county field days, they usually have them on a table for you to grab. That's where I get all mine. As I go out to these extension farms, and they're doing a field day on these are the practices that we've been trying. These are, sometimes they're showing some really cool insect control methods out there that are a little more novel, I guess is the word, these new methods. I think trap crops are, if you've got the turn row to do it, those are a really great opportunity there. And they will say, they'll tell you exactly if you see, so for chinch bugs in corn, according to Mississippi State University, plants that are up to 6 inches tall, when 20% or more of the plants have 5 or more chinch bugs per plant, that's when you need to spray. It's very clear. It's not even like I need to maybe do a whole bunch of math. It's like count them and
there you go.
Kind of thing. Somebody's already made the decision for you.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's really important. And you can kind of track those through the scouting app. You can track those economic threshold levels, and it'll tell you if you know that you're getting close to that economic threshold according to your population counts. Okay, I need to clear my schedule for next week. I need to get in the tractor and go spray, kind of thing. Or I need to go find some insecticide, kind of thing. So
for sure.
But yeah.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. It was great to have you on today, and definitely learned a lot about insects and scouting. So
yeah, you give me a microphone, I'll talk to you all day. It's so much fun. But Kinga, it's always a good time to have a conversation with you guys. And again, if anybody has any questions or comments, y'all can leave them and we'll get back to them later. Or, Kinga, I think you guys have all the Twitter handles. You
can tweet us. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, for sure. So we really, I really appreciate this opportunity today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Cheryl. We'll see you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.